So this came in today, and I was messing around with it for a bit, and I figured I should make a video on it. So, as the name implies, and just outright explains, this is, what is it? Metamorphic Universe GS01. Kept forgetting that name. But yes, this is an oversized knockoff. We'll look at the size comparisons in more detail later, but there you can see just how oversized. An oversized knockoff of Studio Series Bumblebee movie Brawn, except this is not actually an oversized knockoff. I was really surprised. I mean, granted, I've seen like a video on this guy, so I kind of knew what I was getting into, but it didn't really hit me until I got this figure, how despite the very obvious similarities between these two figures, like, there are definite differences, but for the most part, it looks like this is a bigger upgraded version of this, right? But no, they are completely different. Like, completely. These are not the same figures at all. The only thing that's like maybe slightly similar between them is the elbows and the way the arms can move, but like you don't even move the arms that way for transformation. So yeah, it's just really interesting because for so long I thought this was just an oversized knockoff of one of my favorite Studio Series Bumblebee movie figures, but no, it turns out it's a completely new figure based around Brawn from the Bumblebee movie. Nothing to do with the Studio Series version, even with a lot of similar detailing. But it's weird just how much this looks like that figure, right? Like, I know those of you watching this who haven't seen the transformation probably think I'm lying or stretching the truth when I say this, but like when we get to the transformation, you'll see this is not the same figure at all. So yeah, it's just wild. But anyway, it's the Bumblebee movie Brawn design, which I really like. I think it looks really cool. There's lots of really nice molding and detailing all over this thing. The back is really cool. It's got this like third wheel kind of thing going on here with a lot of nice paint all over the place. It's very clean. There's not really much in the way of visible kibble, despite everything that this figure does to transform. And it's neat. He's got his gun, which plugs into his hand really securely, actually, even though it's just a really tiny slot on either side of the handle and really tiny pegs on either hand. But yeah, it's just, it pegs in really solidly. Like that does not that's moving the arm before it's coming out of there. And I guess since we're looking at the gun, let's remove that again. So it is more or less the same gun that comes with Brawn. Whoop, it's rotated around the wrong way. We'll get to that. It is more or less the same gun that comes with Brawn in terms of molding, at least. Yeah, come here. Bring this in. You can see that, like, they're very similar in terms of shape and molding and stuff, but this is very different. I mean, first of all, you can see just how different the end with the drill is in terms of like how this flares out and is much wider than the barrel. Here it's more, looks like it's part of the gun, but one thing that does kind of bum me out is I like pegging this into the top of the rifle. You can't do that with this because it pegs in differently and there's no peg hole. Even though the peg is still here, I don't know why that peg is still here, but yeah, there's no way you can peg this in, so you pretty much have to do this. And I'm not the biggest fan of that because it just makes this kind of big and in the way. Fortunately, you can actually do something else with this gun, which I think I actually prefer to do this because it helps to set this guy apart from the Studio Series version even more, and that's just unplug this, unplug this. You can plug this in here now. And then this can go into the hand like it was before. There we go. So you can give him a shorter gun, and then you can take this, and there's actually a little handle you can fold out and plug that into the other hand. It does tab in. I've done it. Maybe it's just this hand that doesn't want to tab into. That's weird. I definitely plugged it into this hand before. Yeah, there we go. That went in just fine. So you can give him one gun on that hand and another gun in this hand, and now instead of one big rifle, he's dual wielding. And I don't know, I like that. I like how you can do that to kind of make him just a little bit more different from the Studio Series version. And again, bringing back Bumblebee movie Brawn, the official figure. The detailing is practically identical in terms of sculpt and whatnot, though I do wish that some of the details that are added by the repro labels here were added to this as well. You definitely get a lot more going around the back. You still get the gunmetal sections around the armpits and whatnot, the stripe going down the middle, all that. But like, I really enjoy the darker green that the repro labels add to this figure in the legs, and you don't get that here. You do get the gunmetal around the toes though, which looks good. And that's die cast. I believe the feet, the toes in particular, are die cast. But one thing that I am a little bit like, something I prefer about the deco on this guy, not just because of the repro labels, is I actually prefer the gray that they used here as opposed to the black that they used here. Because you get black on the forearms, thighs, helmet, and kind of like a dark gray in other places. I don't mind the dark gray so much, but like, I don't know, I feel like this gray works better with the green and the yellow / orange. And the black, I feel like on this guy is maybe a little too contrasty. I don't dislike it, I just prefer the gray. But yeah, that is that. Now, let's zoom in on the head, and it is Bumblebee movie Brawn's head. He's got his eyes painted in blue. Looks like a little bonbon. There's a lot of nice sculpting in there, and I like the silvery trim that they did all around the edges and along the back. It's a good, for what it is, it's a good looking head. It's a little bit tricky to rotate because of all the stuff going on in here, but yeah, it looks good. The eyes do show up, and for being a live action movie figure, the sculpt is nice. There's this seam here is annoying because that does not like to stay closed, and I'm not sure what I can do to fix that. I've had to do a little bit of work on this guy. I will talk about that in a minute, but yeah, that's the head. Head looks good. For the articulation, the head is on a ball joint, so it can look up a bit and look down a bit, and it can actually tilt side to side. It can rotate, but you can really only rotate to about there. Otherwise, you have to kind of tilt the head up to rotate. It's just, you can't go all the way around because of all the junk going on in the torso, which stinks. I feel like this is enough. I don't think he needs to get any more rotation out of the head, but I do think a little more would have been nice. The arms, I should bring this back down. The arms can go all the way around, and because of transformation, there's a little bit of a backwards butterfly motion. The shoulders, shoulder pauldrons are on like this double hinge, so they can go up like that or up like that. But you can get them out of the way so you can bring the arm out, and this is as far out as the arm goes because there's this strut in here that this hinge is attached to. That strut does not move, so that's as far as it's going to go because the bicep is hitting the strut now. But that's slightly past 90, so I feel like that's fine. You get bicep rotation, you get a double jointed elbow with a lower bend necessary for the transformation, and then an upper bend. And that allows you to get a really deep elbow bend, and you can also reposition the shoulders, shoulder pauldrons to, give yourself clearance. So that's appreciated. There's the wrist is on a ball joint, but you get like negligible wiggle out of it, so it's mostly just for rotation. And then, as you saw when doing the weapon stuff, he's got fingers. we'll unplug this. You've got a ball joint at the base of the thumb, which lets the thumb rotate and wiggle around and move forward and backward. You've got a hinge there and a hinge there. And then the 3 fingers are hinged in 2 places, each one hinged in the same place. So yeah, nicely expressive hands. He does not have single little peg holders like the Deluxe does. Not that I have a problem with that. I appreciate the simplicity of the Studio Series, but this guy does hold the gun just as well. It just takes more effort to get the gun in there. All right, let's zoom back out. This out of the way. He has a waist rotation that does go all the way around. The hips can go forward to 90. If you bring them out a bit, you can go up further. They can go back well past 90. They can go out to more or less 90. When you bring them down, you want to be careful, though, because this is a transformation joint, and I should probably use some floor polish to tighten that up, because I've already tightened this screw a couple of times, and it just never seems to be tight enough. And it doesn't, like, click in. So that's, yeah, something to be aware of. But leg goes up and down. You get a thigh rotation. You get a knee that bends well past 90. And you both do and don't get ankle tilts, because basically what you do is when you transform this guy, there's this tab here. Zoom in again. There's this tab here that goes into this slot that kind of sits in this slot on the foot. And that holds everything together. And the reason that's important is because with that not tabbed in, this piece doesn't really peg in. It just kind of goes around the wheel in the shin, but it's not that difficult for it to, get kind of knocked out of place. So this, pegging it in, will keep this from being able to move out. Only problem is that means you don't get any ankle tilt. So if you untab it, then you can get ankle tilt, but then if you tilt it too far, as you can see, it starts to detransform this. So you kind of want to hold that, and you don't want to tilt the ankle too far, but you can get ankle tilt out of it without moving this other panel. Additionally, you get downward motion. You get the wheel being revealed, but you do get downward motion on it if you want it. And then the toes can bend down just like the Deluxe, and they can bend up. So you can kind of do this if you wanted to get like a stepping forward kind of pose. It can't really, because of the wheel there, you can't really go up any further, but you get a little bit of upward, forward toe motion. So yeah, reasonably posable, but really, honestly, aside from the fingers on the hands and like the slight additional range you get from the ball joint, this guy's articulation isn't really any better than what you get on the Deluxe. Not a complaint. This figure is like, what, maybe $10 more expensive than the Deluxe. So this is what it is, but it's just something to note. Another thing to note is I have had to do some work on this guy. I already mentioned this thing does not like staying tabbed together. It came out of the box like that, and I don't really know how to fix it because I didn't notice any flashing getting in the way, but flashing on this guy is a thing. Because around back here, I think it was this arm, there's like some flashing here that was just kind of unpleasant to touch, so I had to shave that off with an X-Acto knife. And I also had to do some repairs on the bicep. Because, look at this bicep, notice there's this gap there. That's actually better than it used to be. And notice there's no gap here. Also notice that there is this molded line here, but you don't see that molded line here or on the other side of the bicep because that's the back of the bicep. So basically what they did was they took this piece that's supposed to go on the inside of the left bicep and attached it for the right bicep. So I ended up having to take it apart and carve this down a little bit so there wouldn't be quite so big a gap in the bicep. And as you can see, there's clearly still a gap there. So this is better than it was, but it's still like this is pretty messy compared to this, and that's a bummer. It doesn't bother me enough to want to bug the place I bought it from for like an exchange or anything like that, or like a replacement part, because you can't really notice it with the big shoulder pads in place, and it doesn't affect anything in the transformation. You don't see it in the vehicle mode. So I'm just gonna ignore it. Also, it's Brawn, so I can just tell myself it's battle damage, but it is a little disappointing that there was an assembly error like that on this guy. But oh well. Anyway, let's move him off to the side and do our size comparisons. And this guy is actually pretty big. Since we already did this before, we'll just bring him back in real quick. Here he is with the Deluxe, which is admittedly kind of small for a Deluxe, but still much, much smaller than this guy. Then we'll start bringing in our regular size comparison. So here is Dinobot for a tall modern Voyager. You can see he is definitely taller than Dinobot. Overprime for a tall Deluxe. Burnout for a standard Deluxe. And we can't forget Samus. So yeah, it's a big figure. It's a big, bulky, rather heavy, at least in some regards, figure. Like it's not like Tobot weight or anything like that, but it is a pretty chunky boy. And finally, here is unofficial Brawn with the duck tank. Okay, so before we turn this guy into a vehicle, which, as I said, drastically different from the Studio Series version, so not really an oversized knockoff as such. If you like this video or any other video I've done on the channel and you would like to support me, I do have a Patreon or Ko-fi, links to both at the end of the video as well as down in the description. Otherwise, you could always do the typical YouTube thing of like, comment, share, subscribe. And I just take these, unplug them, fold that up, but we're actually going to leave these separated and just put those off to the side. And then we're going to curl up fingers and leave the thumb kind of off to the side like that. Okay, so as I said, this is not Studio Series Brawn. There is a lot of nuance to this too. Basically, you want to first unpeg the forearm door here, and it pegs in really solidly, but you unpeg this so you can open it up, rotate the fist, and then swing it in, and there's actually, you can kind of see there's this, it's hard to see it from this angle, but there is a fist shape right in there. So you want the fist oriented like this because the thumb will fit in right here, which is actually kind of really smart. I'm surprised more figures don't do stuff like that. But tuck that in there, close this back up, and that will do its thing. And then I find it's best for, like at this point, to bend the elbow as far as you can at the lower joint. That'll come in handy later. But just have that bent. And then we can do the same thing for the other fist. Just rotate it, open up this compartment, swing the fist in and make sure the thumb goes in that little cavity, close it up, and then bend that lower joint as much as you can. Now, bring the arms up and out so that you have clearance. And we want to separate this for reals. And I really don't like how this seam is so visible. But actually, no, before we separate that, we want to lift up here, because this needs to unclip from this. You don't want to move this piece while this is clipped in. But there's only the clip on the one side. Now we can split this apart. And I'm looking at it, I kind of think what happened is that tab got warped. I think that's what happened. So I actually left my X-Acto knife out because this guy required some work before, so I figure we'll see if this makes a difference. You know what? We're not going to do it like this. Okay, so this swings out on this armature here, and it's actually on a ball joint. I'm just going to pop it off the ball joint because that's going to make this a bit easier. There we go. That seems to have gotten rid of it. It may have also been mold flashing. I don't know. It's hard for me to tell because like I'm not really looking through the camera that much. But okay. Let's pop this back on and check. So pop that on, slide this in, bring this in and close it up. Does seem to hold together better. So yeah, I think that was the problem. But anyway, we're going to undo this again and then separate these pieces out. And as I said, there's this hinge here, so you want to swing this out and under the arm, and this will come up and swing out on that armature, but you also want to use that ball joint, and it's really easy to pop these things off the ball joints if you twist them too far, which is fine. It keeps them from breaking, but like it does not take much when I'm messing with this thing to accidentally pop it off, and that's just a little bit annoying. Anyway, I'm going to kind of lift this up to make sure that tab clears and pull this out. Swing this around, and again, bring that armature back. You want to bring the armature back as far as it can go. Now we've got this going on. Next, you can bring the arms down, at least temporarily, and you want to kind of pull up here and down and forward, because there are a couple of tabs in here that hook into this upper body. So you've got this tab here and then this tab here. So you unhook all that, swing this out. And then once you get one, it's easier to get the other one because you can just kind of lift this whole thing and bring that out. And now this will double hinge out, and this comes up. And I find the best way to straighten all of this out, because there are these little tabs here that need to go underneath this. I find the best way to do that is to bend this back this way, then with this piece pushed as far forward as you can against this armature, then bring it down, and that should get those tabs around that piece there. I'm hoping that was on camera. My apologies if it wasn't. Now you can take this whole assembly and rotate it 180 degrees. And then this assembly that the arms are on also rotates 180 degrees. Now things get a little bit tricky, because here, what you need to do is get these arms and everything kind of tucked in here, but there's a very particular way you have to go about it, because you want to get these wheels turned around. So what you need to do is pull down to slide this piece down, and that allows you to swing all of this around, and that will kind of get the arms situated. You also want to not straighten out, but rotate the arm so that the shoulder is more in line with the wheel, like this, and bring this shoulder pad up. And now there is this peg, this long peg right here that actually pegs into this hole on the inside of the bicep. So you kind of shift this up and peg that into place, like so. And this can just kind of go like that. And now this will hold in, and this kind of rotates in. And we'll just leave it like this for now, because, also you want to slide this back down, because getting this section lined up can be a little bit tricky. So we've got all this going on. Going to do the same thing here. So pull to slide this down and then rotate it around. You want to make sure you have enough clearance to get everything around there, and clearance is the big problem here. So rotate that around. You also want to bring out the shoulder pad, and see, this is where it gets tricky, because things are kind of clashing together. It's not like you just move it. It's not that bad, but it's a little bit clashy. Want to, of course, shift this up and peg it in. And bring this down, and also remember to slide this back up. Slide it back up. There we go. Rotate this in, and now the shoulder pads will peg together at the front here and kind of make like a bumper. And that is how the front of the vehicle comes together. Most of the front of the vehicle. We do want to leave this, like the elbows, you kind of want bent back just for the sake of having room for other stuff that's going to be happening. But yeah, so leave that for now. This stuff can still kind of swing up there. Now we can work on the legs. The legs, we can, I'm going to do it from the back here. You want to bring the foot down and then rotate this piece out and rotate it all the way out. Then rotate the legs so that the green piece is pointed to the outside. And with all of that done, now we're going to take the foot and angle it down more, rotate the wheel around, and you're actually going to rotate the foot so that instead of like this for the being like this for the robot mode, it's now going to sit like this. And the wheel can come around and it kind of sort of clicks in place. Now comes the fun part. Whoop, that went flopping. So fun part is you have to use this piece here, this like spring here. You have to pull this green armor piece away from the leg, and that'll allow you to pull it out and rotate it around. The problem is that spring is way too strong. Like, it's good for holding it in place in robot mode, but it makes it a real pain to pull out in robot mode and way more of a pain to do it when you're doing vehicle mode. But you want to rotate this around. And I forgot about this step. So actually, before we do that, we want to bring the hip out and then bring that transformation joint down like that. Now we can rotate this out and that'll kind of go back into its place. This wheel actually kind of tucks on the other side of this gray piece. And then there is a tab on the back of the foot here that will tab into this slot just above the waist. Just bring that up and tab that into place. And that is one leg done. For the second leg, it's the same deal. Just bring this up now before I forget. And then with this kind of out of the way, you can rotate this around, bring this out, fold that wheel in and it'll click. Rotate the thigh so that the green piece is facing out, and then slide this up and rotate it around. And again, it's just so, that spring is like, I'm sure that it just wouldn't work as well, that spring, in robot mode, because, you know, that's what kind of holds the shin together, at least partially. So I understand why it needs to be strong, but it does make transforming it a little bit annoying. But anyway, now we've got the legs like this. And now we can bring this together the rest of the way. So what we're going to do, there's a lot going on here that's not like terribly complicated. It's just, again, like way more involved than the Studio Series. So I want to lean this forward as far as it'll go, because it does have a little bit of wiggle room, but lean it forward all the way. With these rear hinges rotated all the way back, you want to use the ball joints to rotate these pieces forward so that they sit like that. They don't peg in, they just sit there, but they'll be fine. Now this swings in and around, and the head will kind of tuck in there. And what basically will happen is, this is going to be difficult to show, so I'll just show you what's supposed to happen. These little pegs that are formed by either side of the forearm are supposed to peg into these holes here on the insides of the legs. And these circular peg-ish pieces on either of the wheels peg around these pegs on the insides of the knees. So that's all got to come together and line up, and it's a little bit tricky to do because you can't really see what's going on in there. But that, also at this point we can now bend the arms in more so that these forearms kind of sit, like you want those tabs closer to the wheels because that will allow them to get around these orange pieces. So do that. You may need to flex this out just a little bit so that things can fit in. And then carefully going to try to line things up so that those forearms peg in and then get that wheel pegged in. And that side went pretty well. This side is probably going to be tough because you may be able to see it. That forearm peg does not like to stay together. So it's a little tricky, but I'm gonna try. And let's try and jam a finger in there and try to squish it into that peg hole. There we go. And peg the wheel in. Bring that back down. Okay, that actually went pretty well. Almost done. Oh, one thing, I should have done this before. My mistake. I'm going to cheat by sliding off this hip armor piece. It's not glued in. It just tabs in. It's tabbed in very securely, but I found out that those come off before. The reason I'm moving that is because this side in particular is tough. What you need to do is you take this half of the gun, and there's actually a peg hole there that you peg this handle into. And that is much harder to do when that armor piece is in place once it's already in vehicle mode. And I should have pegged it in before. That's on me for forgetting to do that. But yeah, that's that in place. And I'm just going to put this armor piece back. Put it back. Come on. There we go. There we go. So that stores the half of the rifle there. And then this half of the rifle, you can see this little these like square divot made by these two pegs here. That actually goes around this handle piece. So you just wedge that in there like that. And then with all of that in place, now you can tilt the toes up to kind of fill in the back a little bit. And then for the last bit here, these flaps fold in, and what happens is there's this tab, this little orange tab right here that will go into this slot on the underside of this piece, and this piece is die cast. Getting this to line up is tricky, but gonna go for it. Bring this in. You also want to make sure that this piece goes behind this orange lip here. So bring that up and bring this in, and you should feel it kind of tab. Yeah, you can feel it tab in, and when you're done, this piece actually goes ever so slightly underneath the canopy. So again, bring that in, make sure it goes behind that orange piece, and there we go. This side goes in a lot easier than the other one. But yeah, that's it. We are done. This thing, it holds together, but it's still a little bit ropey in places. Like you can kind of see around the back, it kind of looks like it's bowed slightly. But there is the vehicle mode, and also we do have the drill piece, and that just pegs in right here. And it holds in just fine. Like that's not coming out because the peg hole is actually in one of the, I forget which one, and I can't tell right now, but like the peg hole actually goes through the tab in whichever shoulder piece has the tab, and the other shoulder piece has a groove for the peg to go, like just a little cut for the peg to fit through. So it's only technically pegging into one shoulder piece, but it pegs in very nicely. And here we have GS01's vehicle mode. It is very different from the Studio Series. Also, you may have instances when you do this where the wheels don't want to turn freely. Just kind of rotate the feet a little bit, maybe like push out on the knees a little bit. You can kind of wiggle things around, and then you can get things spinning a lot more freely. The front wheels don't spin quite as freely. You can kind of pull this out a bit, which gives you a little bit more room for the wheels to spin, but they still don't spin fantastically. I think it's rubbing up against part of the shin. But when you push it in all the way, that definitely gets in the way of the wheels. But anyway, yeah. There's GS01 in vehicle mode. And I told you all, I told you this is 100% not the Studio Series transformation. There is no Studio Series Brawn DNA in that transformation at all. Like, that is 100% its own thing. It does also roll when you get the wheels lined up, but not super great. But yeah, that's not the thing out of place. That's the transformation, and it is kind of wild, and I still haven't quite figured out how I feel about this thing. It's nice and dense. It holds together well once it's together. The transformation isn't what I'd call scary. It's just there are certain things that are extremely nuanced, and you really have to pay attention to some of those elements. Otherwise, things aren't going to hold together well, or things are going to pop off. You saw also that I forgot to deal with this thing properly, and so it ended up having to be kind of awkwardly jammed in by removing the hip plate there. And also, because of how this all comes together, this doesn't really sit at the same angle as this other piece, so that's a little bit I don't really know what I could potentially do to change that, so oh well. But yeah, I mean, this is just as valid a vehicle mode as Studio Series Bumblebee Brawn's vehicle mode, because it's just like, let's take a bunch of those robot parts and figure out a way to fold them into a vehicle. And it, for what it is, it works. I can't fault it for that. It's weird and a little bit fiddly, but like not too bad. This is not like, yeah, it's not a transformation I dread doing. It's just the springs for the sliders on the shins I don't like, especially going out of this mode and into robot mode. But aside from that, like, it's a pretty decent transformation for what it is. I'm a little disappointed that you don't do anything with this really nice back detailing, though. I kind of wish that was indicative of like a wheel that swung out to give it more like a three-wheeled vehicle mode, but yeah, well. I do think it's neat how this vehicle has 4 wheels, and in robot mode, all of those wheels vanish because 2 of them end up inside the torso and one ends up inside each of the shins. And I don't know, I just think that's cool. Now again, this does look a little bit like just Brawn kind of deconstructed and reconstructed in a vehicle mode. The only new detail aside from the wheels you really get in this mode is this cockpit canopy section, which incidentally, there is a scratch on mine right there. The only reason I realized it was there is because I kind of can feel it. But when you look on this side, you can tell that like that scratch isn't there. It's very subtle. So I can live with it, but yeah, I don't know if that was from me transforming it the first time or if it came like that out of the box, but something to look out for. Yep, this is the only new detail you get, and I kind of dig how this is almost like aesthetically, it's got more of like a Tron vibe to it in terms of like the shape. This is definitely not a Tron vehicle. I just mean like the shape of this canopy section makes me think of like the light cycles from Tron. And I like how this is a completely different interpretation of a very similar-ish vehicle, while the figure itself looks almost identical to the deluxe Studio Series Brawn figure, because it's wild to me that the engineering on this guy is so drastically different. It's a completely different figure, as I said. There's no shared engineering between any of them, between either figure. But the vehicle mode is like completely different. and still kind of evokes the thing. I don't know. I think it's neat. It also covers things up instead of giving you the gap in the back of the regular Brawn figure. I do think this is kind of fun as like a stumpier, chunkier vehicle. This looks sturdier. This looks more like a tank rather than, say, the Homer. You know, that car. I do like Studio Series Brawn's vehicle mode, but yeah, this I think has other merits which are pretty cool, and also because of the die-cast and like the feet and the there's like I think the back may also, or at least parts of it may be die-cast. And like up here, like this thing there's a lot of weight located right around this part, so very weighty figure or very weighty vehicle mode. I could be doing something wrong. This thing does not come with instructions. It's just, you know, it's just scan the QR code. That's it. But I kind of wish that this could tuck further in so that it was more in line with this other piece. But there doesn't really seem to be a way to do that. And like this other piece here isn't really a tab. It's not thick enough, so it doesn't really work. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with this, but this is what they decided to do. Oh, also, I should have done this before. Is this Blast Effect compatible? It is not. And all right, well, I'm gonna take this out and check Blast Effect compatibility, and I'm not gonna put it back in. So. Wedge that out of there, and we'll just leave the accessories off to the side. We'll even take we'll leave this on for now. Why not? But is this Blast Effect compatible? This kind of is, but it's very wiggly. It's not falling out, but it is very, very wiggly. It is working itself out as I wiggle it like that. But yeah, you can use this part at least with blast effects, but other than that, you're not going to be using, at least not the peg blast effects, like the 5mm blast effects here. If we grab this, does this work with that? Okay, this does pin onto this, so you can have like a rocket-fired thrill, but this does feel like it's stretching out this opening here, so I feel like probably the peg-in blast effects would not work here. I feel like, but yeah, that's gonna do it for the blast effects and the accessories. So yeah, this is a little, I don't know, almost makes me think of like a turtle. But there's some neat qualities to this thing. There's not much in the way of new reveal detail, but I do like, as I said, how this takes what looks like the same figure and does something completely different with the transformation to give you a completely different alt mode. And size-wise, it is definitely, it compacts pretty well. It's still big, but it feels like the figure is, like, it doesn't feel like a figure that tall, because remember, that figure was like well above Dinobot here. It doesn't feel like this turns into something that tall, despite him being bulky and rather stocky. But anyway, there he is with all the usual size comparisons, and then here we've got Burnout, and definitely bigger than Burnout. I'd say this probably looks more like leader class next to a deluxe, the way this is the way this is proportioned, but yeah, it's a pretty sizable figure. And then of course we've got to do Studio Series comparisons. There he is there, and again, like you can tell, while there are some I think obvious design inspirations taken from one vehicle to the other, namely the fact that these knee pieces end up attaching over the wheels, because you get knee over wheel on this side, on this figure, and this figure, but they're done in completely different ways. So yeah, like the engineering on these are just so drastically different. It is not in any capacity the same figure, which I know I've said that many times, but it just really genuinely surprised me when I first saw the transformations for this thing, because I just figured it was going to be this with some slightly different engineering, and instead it's absolutely not that. And finally, bring this in so we can do the turtle tank with the duck tank. Okay, real quick before I transform this guy back, or as I'm transforming this guy back for the final thoughts, something I realized as I was transforming this thing. I mentioned before I do not like doing the using the slider to get this piece separated going out of vehicle mode. I figured out a way to do it where it's actually not too bad. So basically you just kind of get the foot out of the way so you can get past the hip here. You bend the knee, and the reason why you want to bend the knee is because that then gives you a much better surface to grip, like this gray section here. So then you can grab this and pull the I'm trying to find a good angle to show this. You can grab this and hold this in place and then pull the green piece out. And that's so much easier. I don't feel like I'm going to twist a bunch of plastic off doing that. So yeah, that gives me the leverage I need to get the spring-loaded bit taken care of. So do that. And that'll do it for GS01 Not Brawn. I'm undecided on how I ultimately feel about this figure. There's a lot of neat stuff to it. That got unclipped. There's a lot of neat stuff to this guy. There's the sculpting is great. The detailing is really nice. The paint is good. There's some things I think could have been done a little differently. Maybe some added detail painted here and there, but for the price, I think that's fine. And also a surprising amount of engineering on this guy compared to what I thought this was going to be based on. I am a little bummed about some of the QC stuff. Not even QC, but just build quality, so I guess BC stuff that I had to deal with. But more than anything, what kind of has me at odds with this guy is just the notion that, he's cool, he's big, he's chunky. Both modes look good. The transformation, I think the transformation is totally fine. It does some interesting stuff. But I can't get over the fact that, I still like the Studio Series better. The Studio Series transformation, for me, is more fun, but it's also simpler. And I just really appreciate how this figure manages to do so much more with less. Or not more with less, it does as much with way less, which I think is actually more impressive. And yeah, definitely some of my fondness for this thing comes from the fact that the repro labels add so much to the design, or to the deco rather. But look at it. I transformed the guy in a minute? Less than a minute? It does not take much to transform this guy, but the vehicle mode isn't really any, I guess not necessarily any better, but it's also not any worse than this guy's vehicle mode, and you're left with a robot that's basically just as good. This guy's bigger and heavier, but this guy has the same amount of articulation. You still have the big elbow bend. You can still bring the arm. Okay, you can't bring the arms out quite as far, but you get the bicep rotation, you get all the way around, you get the waist swivels, you get the forward and backward kicks, and I guess you can't go out as far. So I will give it that. You can't go out as far with the kicks. You still get nice knees, you still get the ankle tilt, you still get the up and down at the toe. It's just, I don't know. I think that's kind of where I'm stuck with this guy. He's a little bit more expensive than the Deluxe, but I don't know that he's proportionally better, which just kind of is strange to me. Again, I do not think this is a bad figure. It's just I still kind of prefer this guy. There's something about him being tiny but mighty, and that transformation being simple but so clever. The folding out the roof section of the vehicle is just pop this out and then pop this out. That's it. And it all folds in and collapses down to complete his entire torso. Like, that's so clever. Whereas this guy, you have to unpeg all of this stuff and pull a bunch of stuff out and accordion this out and rotate things around and stuff. It's just so much more work, which I don't dislike doing. Again, I feel like I'm dwelling on this too much probably, and I apologize for that, but it's I don't know, that kind of stuff is why I still kind of prefer the simpler Studio series. But I don't, as I said, I do not dislike this guy. He looks good. Aside from nitpicking about that, the other nitpicks I would have are I do kind of wish that the weapons had a place to store in this mode. They might. Like, I haven't tried these pegs, so maybe this peg can go in. Nope. Maybe it can go into the lower one? Nope. Yeah, so there doesn't seem to be a place to peg this in. You've got the handle you can fold out, which is nice, but like that doesn't peg in anywhere, it doesn't slot in anywhere. And I kind of feel like that's maybe a missed opportunity. That's something that actually did put me off this guy initially, is just having this gigantic rifle that I wasn't, like, I am not a fan of this. I'm genuinely not. I think this is too much gun, and I don't really like how this lengthens it. I really wish that this had somewhere else could attach on this gun, but I haven't been able to find a place for it. I feel like this is totally fine for this guy, but just to add this, then it's too much. But I do like having the dual wield option, so that's something. I'm glad that we at least have this option, and as I said, it's a nice way to separate this guy from the Studio Series version a little bit more, other than him just being bigger, because they really do look practically identical. But anyway, I have said more than enough about this figure. That's all I've got to say about it. What do you think of this guy? Whatever your thoughts, feel free to chime in down below. I always enjoy hearing from you all. Thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you in whatever I decide to make a video on next.